Hi, Michael. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, good afternoon, depending upon the time zone.
Yes.
Hi, Stefan.
Hey, Mike. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
So why did we start recording so early out of curiosity?
I'm not sure yet. As soon as I joined, it started recording. So let me just.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're at. I'm in lovely New Jersey. It's 12 o'clock on the dot. We'll give it a couple of minutes for some folks to join. So this is going to be a takeaway for me. I'm going to figure out how to play some fun music while we're waiting for the next time. And I do have a pretty good eclectic taste in music too. Could be fun.
Because can we get the rights to Cotton Eye Joe?
It's 1 minute after. We'll give it probably one more minute for folks to join. All right. Well, I'd like to be respectful of everybody's time. So I have 2 minutes after the hour. Just wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us at Nutanix through the New York Oracle user group. So today, Michael Stezza will be kicking off the presentation. He is our emerging products specialist. And without further ado, Michael, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dorothy. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, or good morning, perhaps. Welcome. So I appreciate you joining me here. I want to fire right into it and talking about database services for Era, as it's currently known, what it does in the production environments for databases in general, as well as we are hoping to solve by simplifying IT management in relation to databases. So let me start off by kicking on over to our first slide and talking about our flexible architecture. So some of you may already be familiar with the with the Nutanix infrastructure and the way we do things with that web scale design. We can start small and with a few nodes and scale up to any number of nodes that are so desired, adding in the compute and storage resources. So that adds that linear scalability in terms of being able to add on additional workloads. We do support that mixed node types and hardware generations and all those kind of things that you'd expect from the hypervisor, EBC, and things like that. And the other advantage that we have with our fabric is data locality for performance. So we're going to talk about performance a little bit later in the session here, talking about database performance in particular, which is very close to my heart. I used to be part of the database performance team here at Nutanix, so I know all about this subject. We'll get there. So that data locality dictates that wherever the VM physically lives, we want the block data to be as adjacent and as accessible to that virtual machine as possible. So the minute it needs to go to disk to retrieve something, it'll have it on the same host, ideally the same host as what it is trying to read from. That way you get the quickest access path possible. So for anyone that's not familiar with our fabric and AOS in general, some of this will be make a little more sense as we go through our presentation here. And I'll get to the next slide. And this is where we're at with databases on our platform. So this is what we're actually here to talk about in relationship to databases on Nutanix. So the things that we recognize in the industry are things like hard to maintain SLAs just because of needing to manage so many different factors inside our environments. And in my case, in my experience started when I was in the healthcare industry. And we had an application that was backed by a Microsoft SQL database, which is where the majority of my database experience comes from. Something to the tune of 270 field deployments is what we serviced. And it was a monster to keep up with all the patching, all the uptimes, all of the vendor best practices, all of the upgrades, I mean, just so much to keep up with. It was very arduous and quite difficult. So in the case of databases in general, we have things like the need for specialized IT resources. So not just anybody can just hop into a database and expect it to, to work. I mean, you have to have some working knowledge of what it looks like. There's multiple engines too. So in this case, obviously we're talking a lot about Oracle today, but there's also Microsoft SQL, there's Postgres and Mongo and Maria and all those other flavors of databases. And each of those engines has their own considerations and requirements. Some of the other problems that we recognize in the industry is the high cost of copy data. So storing many database copies for various reasons, whether it's backup or dev test. And it can be very expensive on a per gigabyte basis to have so many copies of the databases floating around in your environment. And then the other thing we recognized was it's very difficult to spin up new VMs, new databases. It requires a lot of interaction, a lot of manual processes with trying to allocate resources, to configure things properly. And the complexity of such was a problem that we're hoping to solve here. And a couple quick facts we have at the bottom here. 45 to 60% of total storage capacity is dedicated to accommodating copy data. So this comes from a company, IDC, Copy Data Management Report. This is where we derive this information from. And a lot of what we were hoping to solve is by consolidating this and recognize the problem and bringing some intelligence to this problem. And then 82% of organizations have at least 10 copies of their production database. So a lot of copies, a lot of redundant information and data sitting out there consuming storage, and it can be very costly in addition to being hard to manage and keep tidy and all these things. So that ties right into the key pain points that we've begun to talk about. Now there's some more quick facts here, and we're not gonna sit here and go over these line by line, but just at a very high level, 77% of organizations have more than 200 database instances in their production environment. And each one of those instances needs to be maintained, needs to have SLA requirements and maintenance and so on. There's some of the facts that we've already talked about as well. And then the total cost thereof, as it was measured when the study was done, something to the tune of $55 billion in just wastefulness in 2020 in relation to IT organization with databases. And that brings us to Era. Now we can actually talk about the thing that we're addressing today. And Era, our real key principle here is one-click operations. And we'll see on the next slide, the one-click is an essential part of the overall doctrine of database management with Era. So we can see here, we have support for multiple different databases through both our graphics interface, CLI, as well as APIs too. We have a lot of integration with API calls and ServiceNow, and we'll get into API equivalents in our demo. But moving right into our use cases, we'll see that there's this common theme in every one of these key sections. So these are the things that we do best with Era. Things like one-click provisioning of multiple engines. So we don't just support one thing, we support many things. We have one-click refreshing and cloning to any specific point in time. Cloning with with inserting with pre and post scripts. We also have what are called 0-byte database clones. So that's a very key component in helping us consolidate and manage some of the out of control data footprint of database environments, because we're taking advantage of the Nutanix AOS fabric and technology. We have support for 0-byte database clones. So that helps out tremendously with saving on space. In our provisioning, we also have the ability to define profiles. So software profiles, things like the Oracle version. the Oracle configuration. So applying vendor best practices. Vendor best practices can sometimes vary, not just from Oracle, but also in my case, when I was administering our SQL databases, the actual application vendor also have their own best practices to apply. So it's something similar is very possible for Oracle. And then we also can customize your recovery and adhere to very specific SLAs. So recovery management becomes less of a problem. So rather than having your provisioning and your patching and your cloning and your maintenance as far as backups go, instead of all that being separate, we're looking to consolidate that into one easy to use interface. And database protection. So we'll also have support for that one-click database snapshotting, which in our case is as easy as going in the interface, hitting that snapshot button, making that snapshot happen. Very easy to use and very efficient too. Again, taking advantage of the Nutanix AOS fabric. And then last, what we're gonna demonstrate today is one-click database patching. So again, another big problem has always been keeping up with those security updates, keeping up with those performance updates, and patching the engine. And especially with Oracle, where it's a little bit more user intensive, we have support for patching instances at the software level and conforming to all standard vendor practices. So in the case of Oracle or SQL or whatever, if you have a HA instance or rack or Microsoft AAG, what we have is a standardized process that follows the sanctioned workflow from the vendor on patching the software. So patching the standby, then kicking over the failover, patching the primary, then failing it back. We follow that automated through the Era software. So minimizing downtime, and we are fully cluster aware, being able to spill those instances back and forth as needed in accordance with those vendor sanctioned patching processes. So that's it from my PowerPoint slides. I don't like to spend any more than 10 minutes-ish on PowerPoints. So I'm going to stop the PowerPoint slides right there. Let's go ahead and stop share. I want to shuffle some things out of the way. And I'm going to start sharing my screen for a demo environment. So just bear with me just a moment here. Let's get you guys over to the actual demo now, the actual cool part. So let's go to desktop. Here we go. And let's jump right into our demo. So, hang on. Let me get the right window in front of me here. Share screen. Chrome app, and should be this one right here. Here we go. All right, so now I have my demo environment in front of me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to demonstrate a lot of those processes that we just talked about, things like the provisioning, the installing, all these processes that usually take a lot of manual intervention, a lot of interaction requires from the end users. So I'm going to start off by giving you guys a quick overview of what the interface looks like, and then we'll dive right into some of the actual workflow. So starting off the bat, the initial interface here, just going to draw attention to some of the key features, just overall, this kind of the state of the environment with your databases, the sources and the number of clones, your data usage and the space savings, some quick stats in the interface here. Over on the right-hand side, your error version and the alerts. We'll go over the alerts here in this demo as well, showing what the alerting is capable of. And we do database monitoring. We do keep alive to make sure that things are up and running and alerting end users in case something goes wrong. There's some cloning information, and then any operations in the last 5 days being our demo environment. Not a whole lot here, but and then last we also have our top databases in this list here, which of course a number of which are Oracle that we're going to go over as well. So let me get right into it. Let me start off the first part of our demonstration. We're going to be going over the provisioning process. So how easy is it to provision a brand new server with Era for Oracle? And we're going to do an Oracle rack instance, brand new from the start, from top to bottom, OS, services, database, everything integrated. So let me start off by going to our services here. I'm going to go to my provisioning in Oracle. rack database. And you can see as part of those options here, I can do single instance or rack. And I'm going to do rack in this case because rack is good. So let me go ahead and start off by naming this. Let's do, I don't know, stiz cluster. And we'll just do memo, or let's do NYOG, user group, demo. In fact, let me, NYOG. Yeah, why not? Why not? And then from here, now here's where I can select everything that I need to tell my new deployment what to do. So in this case, we're at a cafe. We're at Cafe de Era, and the waiter comes up to me, sir. What would you like to order? What can I get for you? Well, Mr. Waiter, I'm glad you asked. I need this cluster to deploy it on. I need this network. So in this case, it is my network for the VLANing, and there's all kinds of support for segmentation and things like that. But my network profile is what lets me select what network I want to be on. And we're going to unpack profiles after I start the deployment. The deployment takes about 10 minutes. And while it's deploying, we're going to unpack profiling with a little bit more granularity. The profile is they're essentially the recipes. So if I'm at the restaurant, I'm ordering up whatever I want to eat. I want this, that, and the other, and it's on its way. So let me just go right back into the demo here. So we're going to do NYOUG VM. This is the name of the database VM, the prefix. Now I'm also going to have just a two node instance here. So nothing crazy. It does support going up higher, but I'm just going to start with 2 again for simplicity and just for demonstration's sake. My software profile is where I'm going to define which version of Oracle I want to deploy. I'm going to just go 19C because why not? But we're going to get back in these profiles here in a minute. You can see exactly what version that we're deploying here. These little bubbles will pop up and they'll tell you everything they need you to know. And under my compute, this is going to define the CPU and memory resources. So in my case, I'm just going to use a medium. And let's give the sysasm a password here. Okay, there's that. And same thing for the Era drive. So the Era drive, what this is for transaction log capturing. This is what allows us to actually capture those point in time recovery points. So I'm just going to give it a password here. We can just match this. And we also support the ASM filter driver. If you guys have security requirements in your environments, you can deploy this natively from the provisioning software here. I'm just going to leave that none because, again, we're a demo, so we don't need one, but it is supported and it is available. And then on we go. Of course, also being able to define your SSH key. Now, again, we've already had ours built, but there's the options here that you can upload your file and do what you need to do from a security perspective. So I'm gonna hit next to this. And now I'm gonna input my topology information here. So NYOUG, whoops, there we go. That'll work. And we'll just leave everything as default. These are the database server names. So each of the instances. So these are the actual virtual machines that'll run in the cluster. And we started with the prefix of the NYOUG-VM, and then it appended the prefix to 1 and 2. So that's how that is generated. And then we'll just punch through the rest of the database information here. So now it's where I actually define my database name. So NYOUG. We'll demo it, the SID. We'll just global database name, DB1, password, simple enough. And I'm just going to leave all these other options at default. We'll just do 200 gig. We'll just do 16 gig. And then last, I'm going to select my database parameter profile. Again, profiles we'll get into in a minute here after I start this deployment. But what this lets me do is it lets me inform the provisioning process of the optimizations that need applied for this workload. In this case, here's some of the profiles that we have already predefined: data warehousing, OLTP, and reporting. I'm just going to select OLTP. And then at the bottom of my provisioning screen here, my pre and post commands are available as well. So if you guys have any scripting, Python scripts or otherwise that need deployed, fully supported pre and post scripting can be injected here, and that'll also get included inside of that provisioning process. So I'm gonna hit next to that. Now our time machine, and just like with profiles, the time machine we're gonna get to a little bit more in depth, but the time machine is my global backup and snapshotting suite. So this is what actually lets me define things like my SLAs for recovery. And in this case, I'm gonna select prod. My continuous backup, continuous snapshots of 14 days. Nothing else is currently defined, being a demo environment, but we can customize this any number of ways that are required to meet your backup SLAs as well. So in this case, we can have daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, there's retention policies, there's all those things that you expect to happen with your SLAs and your backups, and we're gonna be able to do that natively. Again, taking full advantage of the Nutanix infrastructure for speed and efficiency of those snapshots and backups. So we get next to this. Last but not least, and then we're moving on from provisioning, our tags. So these are just user-friendly tags that allow us to give you guys some way of managing and segmenting the databases a little bit more grace and optimization. So if you have hundreds of databases, it may be desirable to have tags. These are just human-friendly labels. These are completely optional, up to you guys if you want to use them or not. And I'm going to leave them blank in our case, but they are there for that human friendliness, which is a very large overarching design doctrine of the software. Now, last but not least, here's where we can start to integrate with other applications. So I have the ability to use what's called the API, this API equivalent button. When I hit this, it's going to generate the JSON or script file if you have something you want to integrate this with. And so it's fully functional API. And you can see if I scroll down the window here, all of the database parameters that I just defined in the previous windows, these have been implemented and are ready for injection into a third-party platform, so such as ServiceNow. So pretty cool, pretty slick. And then we provision. So NYOUG has started. And so what we're going to do here is I'm just going to take a quick look at the operations. We can see it's currently underway. It's under its provisioning process, provisioning an Oracle RAC database. And again, we'll come back to this, but just to give you guys an idea of what this is going to do, it is going to do everything, part of the provisioning process that you would normally have to do manually in a fully automated process. There's right down the tree. We can unpack these a little bit more depth as it goes along, but you can see kind of at a high level what it's actually doing with creating the VDIS, creating the VM, provisioning the storage, provisioning the resources thereof. So pretty cool stuff. Very, very hands-off, very automated. At this point, if you're an administrator, you should be able to kick back, relax, kick your feet up, get some coffee, and watch it provision. And now the provisioning process isn't limited to just brand new VMs. The same exact process would be applicable to just new databases. So, oh, sorry, my screen was tweaking out for a second. Can you guys hear me okay? Hit pause for a second.
Yep, could hear you just fine.
Okay, thanks, Dorothy. Cool, then moving on. So that gives you guys an idea at a high level what that's doing. Again, we'll come back to it. So let's go back, and now let's take a look at our profile. So the profile is what we were talking about earlier that give us these are the recipes. You know, these are the profile information that allows me to define what versions of software, compute, and networking, and everything that I need as part of my provisioning or new deployment. So in this case, we have Oracle 12 and 19c available. I can come up here. I can create a new software profile. What this lets me do is it lets me upload and define what version of software I want to make available to the rest of the clusters. And in this case, we have multiple clusters available, but what I can do here is upload the version of software I want, make that available by publishing it. And so let me go into like 19C here. So this is an example of what this looks like from a publishing perspective. All the different versions of Oracle and in the patch set, whatever it might be, and I can come into here. I can make sure it's available and published for users to use, and it's deployable. And we'll get into the update process here after we have that provision complete. So let's go back to profiles. Same thing with compute. Now here we have all the predefined sort of out-of-box parameters that are most common with various environments, but I can make my own. And when I create this, you can see that it's really as simple as, you know, NYOUG. Why don't people putting an H on there? Let me just copy that out. With a demo, number of vCPUs, the cores per CPU, and in the memory. I don't need to create anything right now because obviously we already have our out-of-box configurations, but just give an example of what that looks like. So again, being able to order up exactly what you need and nothing more, nothing less. Very quick, very simple to use. Same thing with networking. Now here's where I can define all my networking parameters. If you guys have VLANing or you know, segmentation considerations in your network, this is where I can create all of my network profiles to make sure I'm deployed on the correct network, such as, you know, QA, dev, you know, DR, and so on. So very handy. And last but not least is database parameters. So kind of going down the tree here, you can also define exactly what kind of parameters you need to deploy with your database too. So you saw in the provisioning process, we selected all this, you know, we selected the version of software, the compute resources, the storage, the networking, and now the database parameters as well, being able to queue up and deploy those configuration parameters in accordance with your needs. So as I mentioned, you know, these are the configurations available from Oracle in Oracle Best Practices. And you can see what the parameters are for OLTP here. Then you may have your own. You may have practices or configuration parameters that need to be applied, which of course we can just create a new one, make it for the Oracle engine, and away you go. Very easy to do, very, very simple. And now let's go back and let's go into Time Machine. So now Time Machine, like I mentioned, this is the global suite for being able to deploy your snapshots and snapshot backups, as well as your point in time recoveries. So we'll just spend a couple minutes here kind of going over this, a very brief overview of what this looks like. So what I'll do here is I'll come in and I'll select any random database. We'll just go to Fin. That's an SQL server. Let's just go to an Oracle server. Why not? And we can see here that in this case, you know, this is not a super robust policy, but just for what it is, I have all my point in time recovery available here in this calendar, and the point in time is down to the second through transaction logs. So you can't actually clone and restore back up to a single second using the restore process here. I can come in, I can select what I want to do, how I want to do it using that super slick interface. I can also clone from this interface as well. So I can come in here, I can create an instance clone. Again, point in time, down to the second, select where I want to go, when I need it deployed, select my parameters. Let me just hit next here. And we won't go through this process just because we kind of already did this through the provisioning, but just giving you as an idea of exactly what this looks like and just how quick and easy it is. Yeah, we'll just select something just to make it happy. Very intuitive, very easy to use, very handy for deploying those databases, database clones, full instance clones, or just databases, whatever is needed or required of the environment. Easy, quick, fast, simple to use. And so let me go back into our dashboard, and I will quickly go over the alerts. So let's go into the alert policies here. And now we do have some alerting capabilities as far as monitoring and status alerts goes. So in this case, we can see that we have a database that's not up. And so we can click on it. Let it load. Come on. I'll just log back in here. Maybe not click on it. And go back into those alerts. So we'll just go over the policy here. So the CRM database not up. So that's one example of an alert that we have for monitoring that status. And so from here, I can look at all my alerts. Now, these are all the out-of-box alerts that tell you what's going on with your environment, providing as much transparency as possible at any given point about what's happening with your database servers. Everything from user actions, such as patching the database, patching a database or patching a database server, patching the VM itself. We detect IP address conflicts. We won't go over all these, but just again, to give you a very high level idea of what this looks like. And some of the key alerts that we'll actually provide based off of the typical monitoring and alerting capabilities that you'd expect to see for a management suite. So cool stuff. Now, the other thing that we support, another thing that's commonly used is role-based access controls. So RBAC is a very commonly, very simple concept. You have the ability to integrate with things like Active Directory, in this case with Microsoft Active Directory, which is by far the most common. And you can give users individual roles and access so they're able to do all of their workflows and all of their individual responsibilities without having to possibly stomp on anyone else's environment or databases or what have you. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like. So I'm limiting my user groups. I'm sorry, roles rather. And so these are the out of the box settings. What this lets me do is it lets me control very granularly about who can do what in the environment. So in the case of super admin, we can see that they have access to everything. Everything from adding clusters to creating databases to refreshing to upgrading and so on. And then kind of, as we go down the tree, you'll see in this case with the out-of-box settings, things get a little bit more and more locked down. So things get a little bit more specific down to the user. And of course, because we're integrating into Active Directory, we can define our groups and we can define all of our users as needed. With the AD groups that would be available if you have Active Directory deployed in your environment, which if you're using RBAC, you probably do. But it's not required. You can still create all these local users, which in this case, all these users are locally authenticated inside of Era natively. So not a requirement by any means, but all fully at the discretion of the end users. So whatever's needed, and then being able to share databases and give user access to the environment as well. So we can also lock down clusters, and we can register clusters to Era. Now Era does support, and one thing I do want to call out in Time Machine. Let me back up for a moment. Now let's go back into CRM. That works. With Era, I do have the ability to deploy and control multiple clusters from the Era interface. So if I come into here and I do a single clone instance, let me see if we have it configured to be able to select our cluster. So what I can do from here is I have what would be a multi-site deployment. So there's a primary Era instance on our local cluster here, Tomahawk. But I also have standby instances across multiple clusters that I'm able to use, and I can select which cluster I want to deploy to. So what these controls let me do is, let me get out of the Time Machine. Let's go back into administration. And so as I'm managing my Nutanix clusters, so if I have multiple clusters, or if I have DR and I have multi-site redundancy and all those fun fancy things that many customers have, I am able to control all those mechanisms from this interface. Integrate that cluster with the cluster registration here, full control, and I can deploy, clone, register, and administer all of my databases and database VMs from this interface. So pretty cool stuff. And then we have the tags, just like how we talked about already. We'll briefly touch on that for that human-friendly labeling. And I'm going to go back to my operations now. So let's take a look at what we did, because now the process is complete. And this is the cool part. So my Oracle RAC database, fully provisioned from start to finish, took a little over 11 minutes. And in that process, it was able to create the virtual machines, do the network servicing, creating the storage,
provisioning. Oh, sorry, give me 1 second here. My audio was cutting out. It does all the configuration parameters that I defined automatically. And so I can drill down and see exactly what it did, register the servers, and built it out. So really, truly, if everything is configured the way I want it to be, it will handle all of the configuration for you, doing all the heavy lifting. So super cool stuff. Now, the last part of this demo would be the patching process. Now, the patching process is very similar in the sense of when it comes down to provisioning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to that software version to show you what that workflow looks like. We won't wait another 12 minutes for it to complete, but I still want to at least familiarize the audience here about what this looks like. So I'm going to go to my profiles. I'm sorry, database servers rather. Let's go to Oracle. On this. And let's see here. Oh, let's go to, yeah, why not? Let's go to this guy. Excellent. All right, so now here is where I have all of my functional controls over the patching and topology. My topology view tells me what's going on with my database and my cluster at any given time. So right now we have our statuses ready. That's cool. Good to see our database is up. Again, that goes back to that alerting and being database aware. So in my topology, I can look at all of my servers inside of this instance. In fact, let me go back to, we should have our NYOUG newly provisioned cluster available. So let's keep using that as a reference to keep on that same thought process. So topology view, very, very quick and straight to the point, gives you a view of the virtual machine, the databases, and scan. Very easy. Now here's where, so right now we're already at the latest version for our newly deployed cluster because that's what we deployed with. So I'll go back to our other Oracle machine here in a moment, but just to draw attention to what the software profile looks like, it will know if you have an update available. If you published an update inside of our software profile, it'll scan and being fully aware of what versions are running on which virtual machines or Oracle instances, it'll give us the option to update. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's go to CRM. I think that's a version that is outdated. It sure is. So now it has the ability to provide that update using the Oracle sanction processes. And in this case, we're going from this April 2018 version up to January 2019. And so what does this look like? Well, let's hit the update button and find out. I can schedule this. I can do the same kind of pre and post commands that I might need to for security hardening or other requirements that you may have. And I can even select the method. So in this case, I'm going to do a rolling upgrade because I want as little impact as possible to my end users. And so that rolling upgrade will do one instance at a time. It'll make sure services are up and running, all kinds of checks and balances that it does prior to moving on to the next machine. And we can schedule this for now or later. You know, if you guys had the need to schedule this for off hours, you could define that here in the schedule. But I'm going to do it now. And confirm here. CRM_DB server. That's that. And now let's hit update. Cool. And away it goes. So if I go back to my operations, you'll see a process very similar to provisioning, where it's going to run through all the standard practices that we talked about earlier, and you can follow it along. You can see what it's doing at any given time. Again, this will take another approximately 10 to 15 minutes to do. We won't wait for it. You know, we're gonna I just want to give you guys a very high level of what this can do and how it makes patching, updating, and all the versioning so much easier, so much easier versus the manual sort of strenuous way of accomplishing this using the standard practice, using sort of out-of-box software. So that does bring us to the end of our presentation. And in this demo, we were able to go over provisioning, patching, understanding the space saving, 0-byte snapshots in our time machine, and also software profiling. So being able to have those predefined recipes for your compute, storage, and software and database parameters. So let me just take a moment then to stop my screen share. Beautiful, and we're right at 12:40, so that's perfect because we want to take this last segment of time to ask the team here for any questions that you might have. So for our audience out there, was there anything that we went over today that was of keen interest to you, or any questions that we generated, something that we can help out and answer for you? And I'll just leave that.
All right. Yeah, I
sorry,
don't see anything in the chat. So I think you're good to wrap up, Michael.
Excellent. Oh, wow. Yeah, it looks like we recaptured some time this afternoon. That sounds good. But please, if anyone has any questions, absolutely, we're always available. I appreciate everyone's time here. Thank you, Dorothy, for putting this all together. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time. Have a fantastic day. If there's any questions or any follow-up, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll get you those answers, and have a good rest of your day. Take care.